Thomas Howard, Earl of Surrey, 3rd Duke of Norfolk. He was born 1473, but the exact date is unknown. He died the 25th of August, 1554, aged 80 or 81, in Kenninghall. He is buried in St Michael's Church in Suffolk. He is of the noble family of Howard. He was married twice. His first wife was Princess Anne of York, the daughter of Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville. His second wife was Lady Elizabeth Stafford. He had 4 children. Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey, born either 1516 or 1517, and he died the 19th of January 1547. His second child was Catherine Howard Stanley, Countess of Derby. She died in 1530, just a few weeks after her marriage to Edward Stanley. His third child was Mary Howard Fitzroy, Duchess of Richmond and Somerset. She was born in 1519 and died the 7th of December 1557. And his fourth child was Thomas Howard, 1st Viscount Howard of Bindon. He was born 1520 and died 1582. His father was Thomas Howard, 2nd Duke of Norfolk, and his mother Elizabeth Tilney, Countess of Surrey. Thomas was the eldest son of Thomas Howard and Elizabeth Tilney, the daughter of Sir Frederick Tilney. He was descended in the female line from Thomas, 1st Earl of Norfolk, the 6th son of King Edward I of England. As a sign of closeness between King Richard III and the Howard family, Princess Anne of York was betrothed to him in 1484. In 1485, both his father and grandfather, John Howard, had fought for the Yorkist King Richard III of England at the Battle of Bosworth, in which his grandfather was killed, thus bringing the Tudor King Henry VII of England to the throne. Due to their alliance to the losing side, the Howard family's titles became forfeit. After the overthrow of King Richard III, he renewed his marital claim to Anne. At the time, Anne was attending her sister, Elizabeth, wife of the new King Henry VII, as lady-in-waiting. On the 4th of February 1495, Anne was married to Thomas at Westminster Abbey. His mother Elizabeth Tilney died on the 4th of April 1497. In her will, she left money to be distributed to the poor of Whitechapel and Hackney. By licence dated the 8th of November 1497, his father married as his second wife his mother's cousin, Agnes Tilney, by whom he had 7 more children. Thomas Howard was an able soldier and was often employed in military operations. In 1497, he served in a campaign against the Scots under the command of his father, who knighted him on the 30th of September 1497. He was made a Knight of the Garter after the accession of King Henry VIII in 1509 and became the king's closest companion at court. His first wife Anne died on the 23rd of November 1511. On the 8th of January 1513, 35-year-old Thomas married the 15-year-old Elizabeth Stafford. When she first refused, she was beaten by her father until she submitted. Elizabeth had earlier been promised in marriage to her father's ward, Ralph Neville. The young Elizabeth and Ralph seemed to have been mutually devoted to each other. Elizabeth's father attempted to persuade Thomas to marry one of his other daughters, but according to Elizabeth, he would have none of my sisters, but only me. Elizabeth brought a dowry of 2,000 marks and was promised a joint share of 500 marks a year. Over the next few years, he served King Henry VIII in a variety of ways. In September 1514, he escorted the king's sister, Princess Mary Tudor, to France for her forthcoming marriage to King Louis XII. In 1517, he stopped a May riot in London with the use of soldiers. By July 1520, he entered upon the thankless task of endeavouring to keep Ireland in order. At the end of 1521, he was recalled from Ireland to take command of the English fleet in naval operations against France. His warfare consisted of a series of raids upon the French coast for the purpose of inflicting all the damage possible, but the sea patrol was abandoned with very little achieved. On the 4th of December 1522, Thomas Howard was made Lord Treasurer upon his father's resignation of the office. His liking for war brought him into conflict with Cardinal Wolsey, who preferred diplomacy in the conduct of foreign affairs. His father died on the 21st of May 1524. The funeral was spectacular and cost over £1,300 and included a procession of 400 hooded men bearing torches, 100 wax effigies and 700 candles. The Duke of Richmond had placed Thomas as Lord Admiral. Finding himself pushed aside, he spent considerable time away from court. In the mid-1520s, Thomas's niece, Anne Boleyn, had caught the eye of the king, and his political fortunes revived with his involvement in the king's attempt to have his marriage to Queen Catherine annulled. By 1529, matters of state were being increasingly handled by Thomas, the Duke of Suffolk, and the Boleyns, who pressed King Henry to remove Cardinal Wolsey. In November, Wolsey was arrested on charges of treason, but died before trial. Thomas benefited from Wolsey's fall, becoming the king's leading counsellor and applying himself energetically in the king's efforts to find a way out of his marriage. His loyalty and service to the king brought him ample rewards. He received grants and lands in Norfolk and Suffolk, was employed on diplomatic missions, and was created a Knight of the French Order of St. Michael in 1532 and the Earl Marshal of England in 1533. In May 1536, when King Henry arrested his second wife, Queen Anne, he presided at the trial of his niece as Lord High Steward. In 1533, Thomas's 14-year-old daughter Mary married Henry VIII's 15-year-old illegitimate son, Henry Fitzroy, Duke of Richmond. Through her father, Mary was first cousin to both Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard, as well as second cousin to Jane Seymour. The match was a triumph for the Boleyn family, as Mary was a former member of Queen Anne's household and a staunch advocate in the Reformation. It was a very advantageous match for Mary, as with no legitimate male heir to the throne, the Duke was seen at the time as a likely future king. However, the marriage was not to last, as her husband died of consumption within 3 years. He had just turned 17. His son Henry was repeatedly imprisoned for rash behaviour, on one occasion for striking a courtier, on another for wandering through the streets of London, breaking the windows of random houses whose occupants were asleep. In 1534, Henry married Frances de Vere. Thomas's marriage deteriorated when he took a mistress, Elizabeth Holland, who he installed in the Howard household. Lady Elizabeth formally separated from her husband in the late 1530s. She claimed that in 1534 the Duke locked her in a chamber and took away her jewellery and clothing. Thomas then moved her to Redbourne, Hertfordshire, where she lived as an actual prisoner. She also claimed to have been physically maltreated by Thomas and by his household servants. When the Pilgrimage of Grace broke out in Lincolnshire and the northern counties late in 1536, Thomas shared command of the king's forces with the Earl of Shrewsbury, persuading the rebels to disperse by promising them a pardon. However, when further rebellions erupted in January 1537, he carried out a policy of brutal retribution. He became the godfather of Prince Edward in October 1537 and was a commissioner in Queen Jane Seymour's funeral in November 1537. By 1539, he was seriously challenged in the religion reform of the king's chief minister, Thomas Cromwell. Henry VIII sought to have Parliament put an end to diversity in religious opinion. Thomas presented 6 conservative articles of religion to Parliament for consideration. On the 30th of May, the 6 articles and the penalties for failure to conform to them were enacted into law, and on the 20th of June received royal assent. On the 29th of June 1539, Thomas, the Duke of Suffolk, and Thomas Cromwell dined with King Henry VIII. Cromwell charged Norfolk with disloyalty, and Thomas called Cromwell a liar. Cromwell played right into Thomas's hands by taking the initiative in the king's marriage to Anne of Cleves. The king was disappointed with Anne's physical appearance when he met her in 1540, and his desire to have the marriage annulled after the wedding gave Norfolk an opportunity to bring down his enemy, Cromwell. On the 10th of June 1540, Cromwell was arrested on charges of high treason, and Thomas personally tore the St. George from his neck. On the 9th of July 1540, King Henry's marriage to Anne of Cleves was annulled. On the 28th of July, Cromwell was executed on the same day that the king wed Thomas's niece, Catherine Howard, as his 5th wife. As a result of the marriage, for a time, Thomas enjoyed political favour and material rewards. However, when Queen Catherine's sexual indiscretions and her alleged adultery with her cousin Sir Thomas Culpeper were revealed to King Henry VIII by Archbishop Cranmer, the king's wrath turned on the Howard family, who were accused of concealing her misconduct. Queen Catherine was condemned by a bill of attainder and was later executed on the 13th of February 1542. Several other members of the Howard family were sent to the Tower, including Thomas's stepmother, the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk. Thomas was appointed Lieutenant General north of the River Trent on the 29th of January 1541 and Captain General in a campaign against the Scots in 1542. In June 1543, he declared war on France in the King's name. During the King's final year, Edward Seymour, 1st Earl of Hertford, and Henry VIII's last Queen, Catherine Parr, both of whom favoured the Reformed faith, gained influence with the King, while the conservative Norfolk became politically isolated. He attempted to form an alliance with the Seymours through a marriage between his widowed daughter Mary and Thomas Seymour, but it was fruitless. On the 12th of December 1546, Thomas and his son Henry, Earl of Surrey, were arrested and sent to the Tower. On the 24th of December 1546, Thomas acknowledged that he had concealed high treason in keeping secret the false acts of my son Henry, Earl of Surrey, in using the arms of St. Edward the Confessor, which pertain only to kings. And he offered his lands to the King. Thomas's family, including his estranged wife and daughter and his mistress, all gave evidence against him. Henry was beheaded on the 19th of January 1547, and on the 27th of January, Thomas was attainted without trial. The dying king gave his assent to Thomas's death, and it was rumoured that he would be executed on the following day. He was saved by the death of the king on the 28th of January, and the council's decision not to go through with the execution. He remained in the Tower throughout the reign of King Edward VI. He was released and pardoned by Queen Mary in 1553. He was restored to the dukedom and the office of Earl Marshal and officiated in the capacity at Mary's coronation on the 1st of October 1553. His last major service to the crown was his command to the forces sent to put down a rebellion in 1554 by a group who opposed the Queen's marriage to Philip II of Spain. The Duke died at Kenning Hall on the 25th of August 1554 and was buried at St. Michael's Church in Suffolk. And this concludes the video. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please click the like button, give it a thumbs up, and please subscribe for future videos. Thank you.